I know a lot of people hated Glass as like the third part of the Unbreakable trilogy of like Unbreakable, Split, and then Glass. And a lot of people hated Glass, and I liked it. I thought Glass was great. Anyway, how are you guys doing today? My name is Elliot, and welcome to This and That Reviews. And it's where I love to just compare movies that I watch to other movies that I have watched. And if you like those movies, you might like this movie. And if you dislike those movies, you probably won't like this movie. Or, maybe this movie is bad and you should watch those other movies. Or maybe this movie is good and here are some other movies you should watch. That is the basis of my channel. And welcome to Not Talk to Me. Bring Her Back. So I saw Talk to Me knowing basically nothing about it. And if you don't understand why I'm comparing the two, the directors of that directed this. And a lot of people are, like comparing this to that. And I'm not going to because I didn't like that movie. It's probably the one movie that I've watched in theaters where more of my time was spent on my phone. I always sit in the back. I always make sure that there's nobody around me so that if there's a boring part, I can just, just be on my phone. And that movie could not grab my attention. I just could not care about anything that was happening in that movie. A lot of people like it. I don't know. For me, this is not why I saw this movie. I saw this movie because I love horror, and because I will obviously watch anything horror. But it was getting a lot of good reviews. And it was getting a lot of rave, and it was getting a lot of like the same kind of horror hype that everything gets. Grossest movie ever. This is the most insane thing you'll ever watch. I threw up in the theater. A bunch of people walked out. Like the same thing that people say about all horror movies. Yeah. This one's correct. This one is correct. The Substance is correct. Terrifier 3 is correct. Terrifier 2 is correct. Yeah. This is one of those movies that's on that level. I will put up this disclaimer for this movie. The biggest disclaimer that I can possibly give you. I hope you're into child violence. I hope you're into violence against children, because that is the basis of this entire movie. That is the entire shock value of this entire movie. Everything that happens is basically child violence. And you better be okay with that, because if you're not gonna like any inch of this movie. And you will probably be on your phone like I was on Talk to Me. This movie, I remember getting out of like Terrifier 2, and I remember because the way that ends, right? There's a lot of graphic things in Terrifier 2. There's a lot of insane things. The bedroom scene, obviously, but like the way that it ends with like Sienna killing Art, right? Getting in her cool gladiator gear with their magic sword and killing Art, right? That's a cool ending. You leave the theater uplifted. You're like, yeah, let's go. Terrifier 3, come out. Right? And so it's gross, but like you get to leave the theater with this pumped kind of feeling. Terrifier 3 does not end like that. And a lot of people that came out of the Terrifier 3 reviews, I think Sean Chandler called it mean-spirited, and I didn't understand what that meant. And yeah, Terrifier 3 is very mean-spirited. It is just a depressing movie from beginning to end, right? There's nothing, like the directors even talked about it being like The Empire Strikes Back of the trilogy, right? It's where evil wins, right? But even so all of the horrific things that are happening, it ends on like a horrific note, and then you just kind of leave and you want to shower. You're like, wow, that was just the grossest, saddest, most depressing thing. And that's how this feels. This feels very much like that. I feel like I should go shower, right? I just wanted to listen to just happy music. And something that I thought was really funny, I think this is my perfect cap off to the Paddington trilogy. And if you're wondering that Paddington in Peru is the cap off to the Paddington trilogy, no, it's not. And you know why it's not? Because Sally Hawkins as the mom is not in Paddington 3. They recasted her with some other random lady, and so the trilogy was not complete. The Sally Hawkins as a mom trilogy was not complete, and good God, they gave us the cap off to the Paddington trilogy. Watch Paddington 1, Paddington 2, and then bring her back. You should probably watch it in reverse order so that by Paddington 1, you'll feel better about life. Watch this one and then watch the other two as prequel movies of Sally Hawkins' character. Back in better times when she was a mom and life was great. The hype is real with this one, is what I'm trying to say. I really like this movie. I think that the worst thing that a movie can do is be boring, or generic, or just feel generic, right? And the plot of this movie is incredibly generic. It's, if you didn't know, it is essentially, it's called Bring Her Back. I think that knowing that it is essentially, like the idea of reanimation, is not, it's not a spoiler, but it's also not really the point. In the same way that if I was talking about Everything Everywhere All at Once, Everything Everywhere All at Once at its core is a multiverse movie. It's a movie about, or not at its core, on the surface. There we go. On the surface, it is a multiverse movie. This movie, on the surface, it's a reanimation movie. It's about the idea of bring her back, right? And so, but if you went into Everything Everywhere All at Once with it's a multiverse movie, and you went in thinking, like, I hope they explain everything there is to explain about multiverse, that's not the point, because at the core of the movie, that's not what it is. And so they don't really go into the nuances of multiverse. They explain kind of like what it is, but they don't like go into it because the more they went, if they kept going into it and tried to explain all of the nuances of how their multiverse works, how their, systems work, why it works, how they develop this, you would just have more questions upon more questions, and it would just keep building, and the movie would stray away from what it's trying to be. This movie, on the surface, is a reincarnation movie. It's about, like, what if somebody died and what if you could make them come back to life? But that's not really what that's not really what the point of this movie is. And so, like, even knowing that it is a reincarnation movie, that's not really a spoiler in the same way that knowing that Everything Everywhere All at Once is a multiverse movie isn't really a spoiler, because that's not the point of the movie. So don't go into this movie with the want of the explanation portion of that, because they don't give it to you, and it doesn't matter. That's not the point. The worst thing that a movie can do is be boring or be generic. And even though this plot is generic, the violence in this movie is something that will stick with you. Maybe forever. Maybe forever. In the same way that the bedroom scene from Terrifier 2 will probably stick with you forever, even if you don't remember any of the other kills. Like, there's always a major kill in every movie, in all of the Terrifier movies. The upside down kill in Terrifier 1, it will probably stick with you forever. There's a couple in this movie that will probably stick with you forever. One of them was on their Bring Her Back Instagram. I think it's on their Instagram, but they were all talking about, they interviewed people that came out of the movie, and they were talking about the cantaloupe scene. That scene is insane. There's a scene later involving wood. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it without spoiling it. Involving wood. That scene is also insane. Not that part, but what happens immediately after that part. But yeah, this movie is insane. In all of the best horror ways. But then even as a movie, I really liked it. I like that they tied... I love movies that do callbacks. I love a good callback in a movie. Something that will be set up at the beginning of the movie and then they will call it back at the end of the movie or midpoint of the movie. Maybe they'll set up something in the midpoint of the movie and then 3/4 in, they'll pay that off. Any movie that rewards you for paying attention to innocuous things, for just silly things that are clearly things, but things that you don't really... It's not really, it's like, oh, that could just be taken as a joke. That random comment could be taken as a joke, or it could be just taken as anything, right? And then they pay it off later. I love moments like that. And that will sell movies for me. And there's a number of them that I won't spoil because I want you to see this movie. The more I like a movie, the more I don't want to spoil a movie. And so this is all to say that if you're okay with children violence, and you want a horror movie that, you know, like, my horror, like, level that I need to be at to say that, like, a horror movie is good is Jesus Christ. you know, like, sometimes I'll be in horror movies and be like, oh, you know, oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you did there. Yeah, like that'll be this is my reaction to like the horror scene that is happening. Like, oh, okay. Yeah. You know, like just that kind of reaction. And some movies like this one, and there were a lot of people in my theater. Not like, it wasn't a packed theater or anything, but like I don't know, 10 people. There were maybe 10 people in my theater and nobody was reacting at all to any of this. And if they weren't reacting out loud. And there's scenes in this movie where I was like, Jesus Christ, oh my God, it's still going. Why is it still going? What the fuck is happening? And that sounds like hyperbole in the same way that, you know, most horror movies are promoted in hyperbole. Like, grossest movie I've ever seen. But again, like I said, Terrifier 2, Terrifier 3, The Substance, and this. Like big budget Hollywood produced, you know, movies that are in theaters that actually live up to the hype. The hype of, oh my God, that was insane. And yeah, so if all of this feels right to you, go see it. And then take a shower. And then watch the 2 prequel movies, Paddington 2 and Paddington 1. Where Sally Field has a family that she is much nicer to. I do want to go into one spoilery thing. So if you are going to watch the movie, you don't want spoilers. I'm going to spoil a part. And you can come back to this part of this review afterwards, but I am going to spoil something because I want to talk about this. I want to talk about the cantaloupe scene. And I want to talk about it in levels of how a horror movie would approach this. And how I can perfectly see what a horror movie would do. A PG-13 horror movie would show... Okay, so obviously you've seen the movie. He gives the kid, Oliver, the cantaloupe, right? For whatever reason, gives him the knife, right? And any regular horror movie, like a PG-13 horror movie, right? Just a broad, appealing movie, right? The camera would pan to him where he's looking through the cupboard. You would hear a crunch, and then you would hear a thud, and then he would turn around, and Oliver would be on the floor, and you would see blood, right? You could like fill in the blanks, kind of. But you wouldn't really know what happened. Maybe like you see like the gap in his teeth. You could picture it, right? That's a PG-13 horror movie. A rated R horror movie, the camera would pan back. You would see it in his mouth. and then it would pan back to his face, and then, or to Andy's face, and then you would see his reaction, and then the scene would cut to the next scene, right? That would be a rated R horror movie. This movie showing him chewing the knife is insane. It's fucking insane. Chewing the knife and just like lingering on this like practical effect shot is insane. This is the thing that like I always talk about, like whenever I watch horror movies and I watch like PG-13 horror movies and I watch like Tarot and I watch like movies like that, right? And they keep doing these like cutaway things, or they, you know, like they keep doing these like very cheap, like, I guess that was, you know, all right, I'm picturing it. Yeah, that's kind of gross, right? When you give your audience something memorable, when you linger on something, it stays with them. And it feels like you're trying. There's something about it that flips in my brain that's like, this movie was trying. This movie was trying to do something. This movie was like, do not forget us. We are not going to be dumped on Netflix like Polaroid. I think Polaroid's on Tubi. We are not going to be dumped on Tubi like Polaroid. You are going to remember this moment. If you don't remember anything else that happens in this movie, you will remember this. You will remember us. And that's all you need. That's all you really need in a horror movie. You just need something memorable. Something that makes you say, I remember that. That was fucking insane. I can't wait for Bring Her Back 2, you know? Bring Her Back Again. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying that they should make a sequel. I'm just saying like that if they announce the sequel 30 years from now, and they were like, oh yeah, this is a sequel to Bring Her Back, you'd be like, oh my God, was that one where he chews the knife? You know, like if you didn't remember anything about this movie, you'll remember that. Like, and it was fucking insane. And I think that like the more that horror movies like give you that stamp of something memorable, I think that is the mark of a good horror movie.